We all want to be in the know, right? To make smart decisions, understand what's going on around us. But honestly, sometimes it feels like drinking from a fire hose trying to keep up with it all.
I hear you. It's a lot to process,
Mhm.
and that's where we come in.
Right. That's the whole point of this deep dive. We dig into the stuff that really matters so you don't have to.
Absolutely. We take a look at all the information out there, pull out the really interesting bits, and have a good chat about it.
Exactly. So for today's deep dive, we're tackling something that's incredibly relevant to all of us, whether we realize it or not. How we decide what things are actually worth.
Like, how do we figure out what we're willing to pay for something?
Exactly. It all comes down to the psychology of pricing. It's fascinating how much goes on beneath the surface when we're at the store, looking at an online ad, or even thinking about investing in something big.
Totally. We think we're being all logical and rational, like, I need this. It costs this much. Seems reasonable.
Yeah.
But there's a whole lot more to it. Thankfully, we have some really smart people who dug deep into this stuff.
Like William Poundstone. His book, Priceless, is a real eye-opener. I mean, the subtitle alone, The Hidden Psychology of Value, kind of gives you a hint of what we're dealing with here.
It's a great read. Poundstone does a fantastic job of explaining how easily our minds can be tricked when it comes to money.
And the thing is, businesses are in on it. They know all about these psychological levers that influence how we spend.
Oh yeah, they're using them all the time.
So our mission today, to unpack all of this, we're going to take a close look at the difference between price and value, what anchoring is and why it's so powerful, why we're sometimes totally irrational about what we think things are worth, how the way prices are presented can really mess with our heads, and some of the sneaky or not so sneaky psychological tactics that businesses use to get us to spend more.
I think once we understand how all of this works, we can start to make smarter choices, whether it's a quick trip to the grocery store or a big financial decision.
Exactly. So let's start with something that seems super basic, the difference between price and value. I mean, we hear Warren Buffett's famous quote all the time, right? Price is what you pay, value is what you get.
Seems simple enough.
Right. You'd think that in a market where things work the way they should, the price of something reflects how much it costs to make it, plus the value it gives to the person buying it.
Like supply and demand, right? If lots of people want something and there's not much of it, the price goes up. If there's a ton of something and not many people want it, the price goes down.
Yeah, basic economics. But when you start digging into behavioral economics, which is basically how psychology affects our decisions about money, the picture gets a lot more complicated.
Definitely. Poundstone really gets into this. He shows how often prices don't really match up with the real cost of making something, or even how useful it actually is.
And the crazy part is that companies can get away with charging way more than something's actually worth, and people still buy it.
It's because, as consumers, we often don't have a good way to figure out what something is really worth. We see a price tag and our brains start doing all sorts of mental gymnastics, comparing it to other things, thinking about what we've seen before, all that.
It's like we're on autopilot sometimes.
For sure. So the big takeaway here is to always question that first price you see. Don't just take it at face value. Take some time to think about what you're getting for your money. Is it actually worth it to you?
Okay, so that brings us to something called anchoring, which is a huge part of how we perceive price. What's the deal with anchoring?
Well, anchoring bias is basically a mental shortcut our brains use. It means we tend to give too much weight to the first piece of information we get about something, especially when it comes to numbers, like prices. Even if that information isn't all that accurate or even relevant, it can totally skew our thinking.
So even if the first price we see is totally off base, it kind of sticks in our minds.
Yeah, and that's how it relates to fair value, particularly when we talk about investing.
Right. In investing, fair value is like the price something should be trading at if everyone was being completely rational and had all the facts.
It's an attempt to figure out what something's actually worth without all the emotions and hype that can influence the market.
But we know the market doesn't work that way. People make emotional decisions, follow trends, get caught up in the moment.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The source material we looked at even uses the analogy of Mr. Market to explain this.
Yeah.
Imagine you have a business partner who's super unpredictable, kind of moody.
Someone you can't always count on.
Right. And every day, Mr. Market shows up and says, hey, I'll buy your shares for this much, or I'll sell you mine for this much. But his prices are all over the place. They don't always make sense based on what the company's actually doing or what its future prospects are.
So Mr. Market represents all the craziness and ups and downs of the market where prices can change for no good reason.
Exactly. And that's where understanding fair value comes in. Even if you can only estimate it, gives you a more stable reference point, a kind of anchor when Mr. Market comes knocking with his wild offers.
So you're not just swayed by whatever price he throws at you. You have your own idea of what things are really worth.
Exactly. And this applies to everyday purchases too. If you've done your research and figured out what a reasonable price is for, say, a new laptop based on the features you need and your budget, then you're less likely to be tricked by some crazy sale that's actually not a good deal at all. You have your anchor price in mind.
That makes a lot of sense. It's like having a shield against all those crazy marketing tactics. Now let's talk about why we're often so irrational when it comes to deciding what things are worth.
Yeah. The source material mentioned the law of diminishing returns and how that plays a role in how we think about money.
I've heard of that in economics, but how does it apply to pricing?
Well, the law of diminishing returns basically says that the more you have of something, the less each additional unit of that thing is worth to you. Like if you find 100 rupees on the street, that's pretty exciting.
It's a good day.
Right. But if you find another 100 rupees right after, you're still happy, but it's not quite as exciting as the first 100.
And if you're already a millionaire, finding 100 rupees probably doesn't even register.
Exactly. What this means for pricing is that how we feel about a price difference isn't just about the numbers themselves. It's about how those numbers relate to what we already have or what we expect.
So it's all relative.
Right. A 50 rupee discount on a 200 rupee shirt feels like a big deal. A 50 rupee discount on a 2,000 rupee jacket, not so much, even though you're saving the same amount.
It's like that first slice of pizza you have when you're starving. It's the best thing ever. But by the time you get to the fifth slice, you're probably not enjoying it as much.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The point is, we're pretty good at seeing the price of something. It's right there on the tag.
Easy peasy.
But figuring out the actual value is a lot harder.
Yeah, that takes more work.
And that's what businesses often exploit. They make the price super clear, maybe even compare it to a competitor, but they don't always make it easy to figure out if you're really getting your money's worth.
Like, you might see two brands of cereal side by side. One is cheaper, but is it actually healthier? Does it use fair trade ingredients? Is it better for the environment?
Those are the things that contribute to the real value, but they're not always easy to see. And that's where businesses get clever with their pricing strategies.
Okay, so how do they use our often irrational sense of value to their advantage? How do they get us to spend more?
Well, one way is by playing with relativity. They present options in a way that makes certain prices seem way more attractive than others, even if those prices aren't actually that great.
It's all about context.
Yeah. Like you might see 3 subscription plans for a streaming service. Basic for 300 rupees, standard for 500, and premium for 800.
Okay, I see this all the time.
Right. The standard plan might not be that much better than the basic plan, but it looks like a steal compared to the premium plan, especially if the premium plan has a bunch of features you don't really need.
So they're kind of nudging you toward the middle option, even if it's not the best value overall.
Exactly. They're manipulating your perception of value by making you compare the options.
Okay, so that makes sense. And the source material also talked about the hidden psychology of value and how companies influence us to think their prices are better than the competition's. What are some of the tricks they use?
They use a lot of psychology. They know we're influenced by things like suggestion, how prices are presented, and even our emotions.
So they're playing with our feelings.
Totally. For example, there's something called charm pricing, which is where they end prices in 99, like 49 rupees 99.
Oh, yeah. I see that everywhere.
It works because it makes us think the price is way lower than it actually is. It feels like a bargain, even if it's only 1 paisa less.
I never thought about it that way, but it's true. I totally fall for that. What else?
They also use scarcity. Limited time offer, only a few left in stock.
Oh, yeah. I hate that. Makes me feel pressured.
It creates a sense of urgency. It makes you feel like you have to act now or you'll miss out.
So they're not actually making the product better or more valuable. They're just making you feel a certain way about it.
Exactly. And that's why understanding these psychological tricks is so important. Like the source said, our thinking is limited by these built-in biases.
Biases we don't even realize we have.
If we don't recognize them, we end up making decisions that aren't in our best interests. We might buy something we don't need or pay way more than we should.
So we're basically being manipulated.
In a way, yes. But the good news is that we can learn to be more aware of these biases and make better choices.
Okay, but how do we do that? How do we become smarter consumers?
Awareness is the first step. Just understanding that these psychological forces are at play is huge. Once you know that you might be vulnerable to anchoring, or that you tend to focus on relative price differences, you can start to be more critical.
So just knowing about these tricks can help us avoid them.
Absolutely. The source material also talked about this in relation to investing. It stressed the importance of controlling your emotions and using logic to make better financial decisions.
which can be hard, especially when the market is going crazy.
It definitely can be. The source talked about how market sentiment can swing wildly from panic to euphoria, and how a rational, value-based approach can help you ride out those waves.
It's like instead of getting caught up in the hype, you focus on the actual worth of the company, its long-term potential.
Exactly. And we could apply that same thinking to our everyday purchases. Before you buy something big, take some time to do your research. Figure out what a reasonable price range should be. Don't let yourself be pressured by limited time offers or huge discounts that might not actually be real.
It's like being a detective. You have to look for clues to figure out the truth.
Exactly. And while we're not giving investment advice here, the source did mention some ways to minimize bias in that area.
Like what?
Things like working with a financial advisor who can help you make more objective decisions, or setting up a systematic investment plan where you invest a fixed amount regularly, regardless of what the market is doing.
So you're not constantly reacting to every little change in price.
Exactly. It helps you stay disciplined.
Yeah.
And in our everyday lives, we can do similar things. We can make a budget and stick to it. We can wait a day or two before making a big purchase to see if we still really want it.
It's about being more intentional with our spending.
Exactly. Okay, so let's wrap this up. We've covered a lot today. We've seen how the price tag isn't always a good indicator of real value.
Yeah, it can be really misleading.
We've learned that the first price we see can really stick in our minds, thanks to anchoring.
And that we're often not very good at judging value objectively.
We tend to make irrational comparisons and get swayed by how prices are presented.
And businesses know this and use it to their advantage.
The good news is that by understanding these biases, we can become much savvier consumers.
We can take back control of our spending decisions.
Exactly. So here's something to think about. The last big purchase you made, think back on it. Did you really assess its true value based on your needs and what you knew about it? Or were you maybe influenced by that first price you saw, how it compared to other options, or how the deal was presented?
It's a good question to ask ourselves.
Now that you know a little more about the psychology of pricing, would you approach that purchase differently? It's worth taking a moment to really think about the prices you see every day. You might be surprised by what you notice.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We hope it's given you some food for thought and some tools to make smarter decisions.
Absolutely. Thanks for listening.